Well, the notion of social bonds was first mentioned on this show about a year ago, but just last week the O'Farrell Government in New South Wales announced the first demonstration project. Peter? What does it mean for investors? It was exciting,
given we've been talking about it for a year. So what the New South Wales Government has announced, that it's going to look at 3 proponents in the area of social impact bonds, or as they call them, social benefit bonds. One is going to be in the area of helping prisoners reintegrate into society and not reoffend, and a couple of proposals in the area of working with families so they don't lose their children to institutional or to foster care. So they've now announced the first 3 proponents, and they'll be working with them over the next 6 months to develop up bonds. So the whole aim here is that the government is going to be willing to pay for outcomes in those areas. Works with not-for-profit organisations. The not-for-profit organisations know they will be paid if they're successful, and therefore can issue bonds so that an investor can actually invest in these outcomes. They can get a financial return as well as a social return.
Tell us specifically who the proponents are, these
three up. One is Mission Australia, and that's going to work with 500 repeat offenders in Parklea and Junee prisons to see if we can try and prevent them stop reoffending. Because, of course, when prisoners reoffend, it's very expensive. They go back to jail, they go through the legal system. The second one is UnitingCare Burnside. They're proposing to work with children who are under 5 years of old and their families to try and help them so that the children don't have to go into foster care. And the third, and we're going to hear a bit more about this later, is Benevolent Society. They're going to work with 550 families, it's being proposed. Each of those has put forward a proposal that it can raise funds, $7 million or $10 million, from the private sector to help them scale up to deliver these services. And, of course, if they're successful, it's a win-win-win. The not-for-profit organisation wins, the investors win, the government
They get the return, the government makes the saving. We will get to that in a bit more detail, but there's also been a report last week which really showed why there needs to be more investment in Australia in early childhood. This is about social exclusion, and there are 1 in 25 children now facing a high risk of that.
I know. I mean, it just shows why we need to put more money into early intervention. What the NATSEM report shows that, as you say, about 4% of children are in positions where they face multiple disadvantages. Now, even though they're children now, we know what the result will be. We know the evidence that these are the children who, in 10 or 15 years' time, they'll be welfare dependent, they'll have poorer health, they'll be likely to have more dysfunctional relationships, that unless we can intervene early, then those children will become the welfare dependents of the future.
We know from social business that this social investment bond, the idea kind of started in the UK. We're seeing more use kind of spreading, though, Peter, in that area.
Well, it is. Sometimes when you're talking about these social impact bonds, there's a lot of talk and you wonder, well, what's the reality? But just in the last fortnight, you can start to see that they're starting to get traction in the UK. The first example we've talked about was Peterborough Prison, but now you've got a number of local authorities in the UK indicating that they are going to issue bonds to help not-for-profit organisations to deliver public outcomes. So Essex County Council has been the first council in the United Kingdom. It's going to be able to issue bonds, and again it is to provide a whole range of support families for children who are really disadvantaged. Manchester City Council is going to issue bonds, similar areas. It's looking at the kids who are really troubled and looking at funding foster carers, specially trained for 24 hours with all range of support. It's very obvious that a relatively small proportion of families are imposing huge costs now on UK public budgets.